there are so many of you joining today. Today's topic is our government relations and our policy work at Colorado CASA. And I'm proud to introduce our very own contract lobbyist, Amy Pitlik. She's here to help us learn about the upcoming legislative session and the many opportunities that we all have to get involved and make our voice be heard and speak up for children. Amy will provide a preview of the 2022 legislative session, which runs from January through April or early May. And she's going to share the opportunities for staff and volunteers to engage. So preparation for this 2022 session is underway, and we have several legislative priorities this year, more than I've experienced in the 4 years that I've been in with the state organization. So very exciting time for us. This session is an opportunity to get acquainted with our state level policy work that we do and may lead to additional trainings around how to get involved at the state capitol. Your experiences as staff and volunteers, you are the constituents and you are a crucial part of this process. So we're really excited you're here to learn more how we can all get involved and roll up our sleeves and help our CASA kids throughout the state. So more about Amy. We are just so delighted to have her on our team. I think we're going on a little over a year. She's newish to us, but not new to Mendez, the firm that she's with. Amy Pitlik has 15 years of campaign and government relations experience in Colorado. After working her first ballot initiative campaign in 2006, she was hired by Mendez, Steadman and Associates at the time to support the firm during 2007 and 2008 legislative sessions. And then in 2008, she moved in-house to Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, where she served multi-states for their policy, political, and government relations role, spanning 5 legislative sessions there. So she's worked in other states as well. She's increased her healthcare experience and worked in-house for InnovAge. And then she moved to K-12 policy advocacy for Stanford Children in 2015. She served in leadership roles for statewide ballot initiatives to increase K-12 funding and led organizational political work. She's an expert with 501c3s and 501c4s and functions there, and she's skilled at navigating complex coalitions to achieve policy outcomes. And I would say our Colorado CASA network is a little bit of a complex coalition. She has just been such a delight to work with and just brilliant, wicked smart. So I can't wait for you to hear from her today. She holds a bachelor's degree in political science and women's studies from Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa. So please help me welcome Amy Pitlik. And Amy, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Jenny. It's always a little bit awkward for somebody to read your bio aloud, but all of those things I'm proud to say are true. And as Jenny mentioned, this will be my second session representing you all. It has been just truly a delight to work with Jenny and the state CASA on number one, learning about what you all do, the vital role you play in young people's lives, and getting to represent you at the Capitol is truly an ongoing honor. And as Jenny mentioned, we have a lot of priorities this session. I'm very excited to dig in and share them with you. Very excited that I hope this whets your appetite to be involved in our ongoing legislative work. I know it's not necessarily what excites everyone or maybe brings you to your work or volunteerism with your local CASA, but for those that are interested in digging in more, I remain here for you and would be happy to have any offline conversations about anything that you're particularly interested in. I did throw together a bit of a PowerPoint presentation for you. I know they're a little bit boring, so I will try to make it as interesting as possible. Please don't hesitate to, interrupt. Lily and Jenny are going to help me monitor the comment section, the chat section. If anyone has questions, happy to take them as we go. Also, we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So either way works for me. Just want to make sure that I'm not glossing over something you want to dig in a little bit more while leaving plenty of time at the end to chat. So if that sounds good to everyone, I can't really see your faces. Not many of you are on camera. I will jump right in and we will talk about everything we expect and more. So my goals for this session to cover just kind of the preview of what specifically we are working on as we get toward January, a couple bill rumors that we think will impact the work you all do, why we need you to be involved, why it's important for you to be involved, how it helps us ultimately accomplish our policy goals for you to be involved, and some of those opportunities, and then we'll get into questions. I think we'll have a little bit of a, kind of a parking lot. So Jenny mentioned there may be an opportunity for additional trainings down the road. If there's something we need to dig in more, or if there are questions specifically you have around things like legislative process, we can do side trainings for those things to make sure that when it comes time, if you wish to be involved, you have all the tools you need to be successful. So first, I'm going to go through our priorities as we know them. We have a pretty full plate. The first bill that we're working on is a bill that's been about 1.5 years in process, and we're calling it the FLEX program, the Financial Literacy and Equity Exchange Program. This is a concept that came about to help 18 to 24-year-olds who are either transitioning out of foster care or receiving state or federal housing vouchers, or are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless, create financial stability through a mechanism we would create to do a matching with the state and federal housing vouchers they're receiving to invest in a savings account for that young person, to pair that with financial mentorship, pair that with a bunch of other supports to make sure that we have these young people who are trying their best to make it on their own, and we can help provide a little bit of a financial padding so that they're not one paycheck away from homelessness, that we are building a pathway for them to have financial security that, the rest of us through our privilege get mostly through our families or not being somebody who is at risk of homelessness. So right now we're working on getting sponsors for this. We do have one sponsor who I think is particularly interested. She's also looking at expanding it beyond the foster youth or youth at risk of homelessness population. So it has a potential to become a pretty big bill that I think would provide a lot of financial stability for multiple populations, pretty much anyone receiving state or federal housing vouchers as it currently stands. This will cost money to the state, which is always difficult in Colorado. As you all probably know, we are a state that has a difficult time raising revenues. So the state budget that we have is pretty much what we get, and everyone gets a piece of that pie. So elbowing out a little bit of space here to provide this program to youth will be a challenge. But I think with the data we have behind it, this is a program that's been piloted by the 7th CASA. I believe that's right, Jenny. So we have some data coming in on how it can really help those young people toward financial stability. The other ones don't deserve nice pie charts, so I'll just go through them. Probably most excitingly for me, we're going to work on getting CASA a line item budget increase. CASA hasn't had a line item budget increase since 2018. Fortunately, you all are one of the few that didn't suffer a severe cut during COVID, but it's time at this point, as you've experienced increasing volunteer loads and increasing client loads, to see if we can't get you some more base funding. So Jenny and I have been working with members of the Joint Budget Committee to create a case statement around that. We're hoping to go in maybe asking for as much as $1 million extra, recognizing we might get a little bit less than that. But that's one of the more exciting opportunities, and we'll provide, as we'll get into later, several touch points for you to be involved should you wish to help us advocate for that. Next, this will be my first in my career working on a special license plate. You've all probably seen special license plates everywhere. I provided an example for you from the Rocky Mountain National Park special license plate. Last year, foster families were successful in getting a special license plate, which I think got the thinking going for us that that would be nice to have. So the process for that, there's a lot of session work that has to be done, including collecting 3,000 petition signatures of people who are supportive or would get the license plate. To be eligible, then you have to make a contribution to a relevant nonprofit organization that basically attests that you've made that contribution. And then you can go down to your friendly DMV and request once it's been designed and approved and all of that jazz. So that work is being led by the 17th CASA. And so I think you'll probably start to hear more about that in the coming months. Certainly the first ask there will be to sign any petition you see to say that we have enough people in the state that are interested in it, and it should be something we can accomplish. As a side note, special license plates are bills that legislators love to hate and hate to love. They groan a lot about it, but I've not seen one be voted down. So I think as long as we do our homework coming into session, we ought to be successful there. And hopefully in the coming years, should you be interested, you too can have a special license plate honoring your service to the court-appointed special advocates program. The last piece of legislation that we are looking to lead this session is kind of more of a cleanup or a clarifying bill. So currently in CASA statutes, there's a tension between the definition of child and youth. And a strict reading of statute would say that once a child reaches 18, you may no longer have authority to serve their cases. So in cases of dependency, neglect, and others that go past the age of 18, technically in statute, your authority to remain involved in those cases is unclear. So we're going to go in and clear that up and make sure that for those cases that go through 21, there's no doubt that a judge can continue to make sure a CASA volunteer is involved. This should be non-controversial. I think a couple bills over the last several years that have done more of the youth and transition type work have really alerted us to this tension, but I believe the current practice has been to allow CASA volunteers to stay on those cases, but we just want to clear it up in statute should anyone raise that tension. And then the big other bill we're hearing about, which is not ours, and State CASA hasn't taken a position on it yet, but they probably will once it's on bill paper, is the Office of Civil Rights is looking at bringing a bill, or is it the Office of Child Representative? Sorry, I've got my offices confused. The Office of the Child Representative is looking at bringing a bill that for children 13 plus, it would change their model of representation client directed. So gals and others would stay best interest for under 13, but once that young person reaches 13, they're looking to change it so that their representation is client directed, which would effectively then leave CASAs in a place of the only best interest representative of the child throughout the entire process. Jenny, do you want to weigh in any more on that? You're on mute. I don't think she can unmute, so I guess you're stuck with me.
Here I am. Yeah, I just had to get permission to unmute. You don't want to hear my dog barking in the background. Yeah, an example of this would, first of all, other states, this is trending heavily in other states. Many other states that have a similar child welfare delivery model as Colorado have already shifted into this. This has been something that the executive director of the Office of Child's Representative, which is the state organization for guardian ad litems, has been wanting to run this for quite a while. And an example of it would be when a youth is 13, the guardian ad litem would then be providing client-directed representation. So that youth would be able to, if it's in their best interest or not, be able to direct the recommendations and role and the representation that the guardian ad litem is providing for that youth. And CASA, our work, we know we are advocating for their best interest, whether the client wants that or not, whether the youth wants that or not. And so an example would be, we had a statewide conference last month, and I'm sure a lot of you were able to participate. And we had a keynote speaker, a CASA volunteer from Pueblo, and the youth Savannah, and Jackie was the volunteer's name. And towards the end of their time sharing and questions and answers, and they did kind of a talk show model in sharing their really touching story and relationship. And but Jackie had to make a decision and make a recommendation as a CASA volunteer for Savannah that Savannah did not want. And I can't remember if it was about schools, you know, aside, neither here nor there. In the end, Savannah was thankful that Jackie was able to advocate for her best interest, even though at the time Savannah didn't want that, because it turned out that it was really in her best interest. And so this really does leave CASA's role very unique and separate from the role of a GAL for our older youth. And like Amy said, we haven't taken a position on this yet, and we have not seen more information or the bill language yet, but hope that wasn't too lengthy of an example.
We have one other question in the chat. I think it looks like that kind of answered Alex's question, but Alex, if you still want more clarity on best interest versus client directed, let us know. But Leah is asking Amy if you know who the sponsors of the bill are.
Yeah, Leah, that's a great question. Right now we're talking, and this isn't super public information, so please don't shout it from the rooftops. We're working with Representative Leslie Herod on the Flex bill. She had asked for us to work with either President Leroy Garcia or Senator Dominic Moreno for her Senate sponsor on that, and we're still plugging away there. I don't have a sponsor yet for your definition of youth. We're trying to figure out actually if that can go in the Flex bill anywhere, if that would fit under the title, so it wouldn't have to be standalone legislation. Other than that, I've spoken with the majority leader, Danae Escar, who's interested potentially in carrying it for us, but didn't anticipate, you know, a problem getting a sponsor. So that's, we're kind of trying to hammer out Flex first, and then we'll go down the path of if we need a standalone for that statute bill. My understanding is the 17th Judicial District CASA has a commitment from Representative Shannon Byrd on the special license plate bill. So I anticipate that's where we're at on those. And then of course the budget increase really will be hopefully a JBC initiative that will include all members of the Joint Budget Committee, which include Dominic Moreno, Chris Hansen, Bob Rankin, Leslie Herod, Kim Ransom, and Julie McCluskey, off the top of my head. So hopefully that answered that. I wanted to touch a little bit on kind of the overall flavor of legislative session with some things that have been happening since last year. As you all are probably very aware, there's been a fair amount of federal stimulus dollars flowing into the state due to the COVID pandemic. And we really have three processes that have been playing out in the interim to try to help allocate what remains of those dollars. So there's been the Behavioral Health Transformational Task Force, the Housing Affordability and Stability, I think, Transformational Task Force, and an Economic Security Task Force. So the Behavioral Health and Housing Task Force are due to report recommendations by the beginning of session on how to allocate. The behavioral health has about $450 million, the housing about $400 million, how to make recommendations to the legislature on allocating those. I think no matter what programs they flow through, between the two, we'll have hopefully impacts on the families you all serve, but not specifically a line item into CASAs. Though we do continue to monitor that behavioral health work in particular, because I know you all play such an important role in helping the young people you serve link up to both health and behavioral health services. So, you know, if there's an opportunity for us to grab some of those one-time funds to be able to support the work that you already are doing, we're gonna do that. The governor announced his budget, which sort of forms the basis of our budget work, on November 1st. The Joint Budget Committee is actually starting their work today on, you know, the foundations of their budget proposal for this year. So as we really get into December with the next revenue forecast and January, where we'll have hearings and briefings from departments, it'll really start our opportunity to begin to advocate for that budget item increase. But this all still plays back on the landscape of a global pandemic that continues to be disruptive in a lot of interesting and perhaps unexpected ways. And I think the legislature has a lot of hopes for this session that they can tackle some of the issues that they maybe did in haste over the last two sessions and maybe make some tweaks there. It is an election year, which makes sometimes big packages of transformational legislation difficult, but they kind of say that every election year, and it remains to be seen. So that's kind of the baseline of what we're heading into. But I have a lot of optimism that we're going to be able to be successful on all of these priorities. I, you know, anticipate a lot more child welfare type oriented bills that we haven't necessarily heard about yet. And, you know, many thanks to those of you on the call who are on our legislative committee and help inform our positions during session. You all have taught me a lot and have been invaluable as quick reviewers of legislation. So thank you again for those of you who serve in that role. Jenny, to your question about who's sponsoring the client-directed bill, I don't know. I don't think OCR has shared that with us. At least not that I've heard, but perhaps we can get clarity on that sooner rather than later. I assume they'll have a stakeholder process that they'll want you to be involved in as we get closer to session. All righty. Oh.
On a note for our network, funny, don't know where you found that picture.
Google.
Oh, just to note for all of us, we've had sessions where we haven't run any bills at all and haven't gone for an increase request. And so this is a particularly exciting session with 3 different possible bills and an increase.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of work and a lot of opportunities, and I'm excited for those. I think this leads us perfectly to why we need you, why we need staff and volunteers to be involved, and that's you are truly the best messengers to legislators. They get tired of listening to me talk, they get tired of me asking them to do things, but you know, the lived experience you all have, the day-to-day passion you all have is truly the most compelling argument to 99% of the legislators, to the extent that, you know, we can take somebody who is a direct constituent and share those experiences is more impactful than me trying to explain them. You know, the extent that maybe some of you actually already have relationships with your elected officials is invaluable. And maybe they don't know that you're a CASA volunteer or that you work at a local CASA, and just sharing that information with them creates a level of visibility for CASAs and a level of credibility that they probably knew on some level, but attaching a face to it or a friendship with it or a professional connection with it makes all the difference in the world. Which is why we're going to bring back our CASA Lobby Day, hopefully. You know, any drastic change probably to COVID might derail that if it feels suddenly unsafe for gatherings. But Our intention is to do an advocacy day at the Capitol, probably in early session. And we'll be looking at, in all likelihood, supporting legislation like the Flex program, but also supporting the budget increase and talking about perhaps, increased volunteer caseloads, increased client caseloads, and why a few extra bucks come into each CASA would make a big difference on your ability to serve those families. Other opportunities are always to testify. As these bills that we are planning to introduce have hearings, you'll have an opportunity to testify in front of committees of reference. I think having volunteer staff or sometimes even directly impacted youth makes just really a ton of difference in terms of the credibility we're bringing. This isn't just an idea adults brainstormed in a room. This is a bill that could have very positive real life impacts to the people we're serving. If testifying isn't quite your jam, I understand it. There'll be opportunities, I think, to email your elected officials to, write in a way that you're comfortable, your stories or why something is important to you. And I think we can send those directly, and I can also help facilitate making sure that legislators receive that instead of it going kind of into a black hole of a constituent box somewhere. And then April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, and historically CASAs have kind of participated with other organizations to bring awareness to that month, and we'll look to do some activities at the legislature again around that.
Amy,
Yes.
Josefina is asking if we know if the Children's Caucus will return in person this session.
That is a great question, and I do not know the answer to it, but I will make a note and try to get that for you. I went through that quicker than I thought I would, but hopefully leaving plenty of time for all of the questions I'm sure you have, or at least giving you some precious time back to your day at worst case scenario. So I will stop sharing. I've put my email address here. Feel free, please, to email me. I will do my very best to get back to you promptly if you have any questions or want to raise anything that perhaps I'm not thinking about that you've heard about. I truly mean it. I'm not putting my email there just to be funny.
Amy, I
Yes.
think I see the first question that came in, and I think it would probably be really helpful for a lot of folks in the call, especially CASA volunteers. Can you just explain what the Children's Caucus is and maybe give a little bit, I don't want to speak for, but maybe like a little context around the different opportunities, maybe like a little bit more in depth, if that question makes sense? Like, what is Children's Caucus, and what, maybe like what would they testify, or, in this situations, just for the CASA volunteers who are a little less familiar with this arena?
Yeah, so I assume, Josefina, your question is for the legislators who have voluntarily opted into a Children's Caucus. I can't see your face, but I'm gonna guess that is the basis of the question. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So the legislatures, they kind of form affinity caucuses. There's a Black caucus, Latinx caucus, Children's Caucus. There's, I think, like a hunting caucus. There's probably like a ranchers caucus. So it's just a group of legislators who have chosen children's issues, predominantly children's welfare. It's been less about K-12 in my experience. And they meet on a semi-regular basis to take positions as a caucus in support in legislation, things like that. During the course of the pandemic, as a lot of things went virtual and not all legislators were in the building, some of those caucuses fell off a little bit. And I anticipate they will again be meeting in person on a fairly regular basis, but I don't know that for sure.
And Amy, there's a couple more questions, but if folks in the call wanted to figure out if like their legislators participated in that, what would be the best way?
You know, that's a great question. I think we could think about putting together kind of I don't know, an introductory email template for you all to send to your folks being like, hey, this is who I am. I'm your constituent. These are issues that are important to me. These are why these issues are important to me, and ask. I don't know that, you know, in terms of like time and workload, you might have champions on the issue who just due to capacity aren't in a caucus like that or aren't particularly involved, I guess, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And I think it might be smart for us to start to kind of do that session intro type communications with your electeds just to build that relationship.
Thanks. Leah is asking again, I'm sure if you said this or not, but did you know the sponsors for the OCR bill?
I don't.
Not yet. Okay. Sorry, Leah, that information hopefully will be coming. We have another question. Are there options for an organization to sponsor or donate? I work at a family law firm and I bet they'd be all over this.
That's a Jenny question.
Yeah, absolutely. Something unique that Colorado CASA is able to do as a state organization is represent all of the 18 local programs and this big band of a network that we are on this call and all throughout Colorado. And we're able to represent you with our government relations and policy work. I would say it's about a third, quarter or a third of the work that we do at Colorado CASA. And we would love to talk about, you know, really enhancing this work and absolutely. So Joelle, I'll give you a direct message with my email. Please, you can reach out and talk about some creative ideas.
And we have a question. Go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to add, I think, you know, if we do an advocacy day at the Capitol, Jenny, that's always a great opportunity to plaster a law firm logo on all of our information and things like that. So plenty of needs for sponsorships and donations and plenty of ways that I think we can thank you in return.
Great. I was just going to mention too that if you want to raise your hand, I can unmute you and you can ask your question directly as well, instead of you might be tired of hearing our voices. I don't know, Karen, I can't see you, but would you like to ask your question or would you like me to share it? If you want to just put in the chat quick, I can unmute you if you want. We'll just move on, but if you would like to ask your question directly, please do raise your hand. So the next question was, how would they let you know if they are ready to get involved with testifying, for example?
I mean, I think emailing me, Jenny, Lily, I don't know that there are other national folks that would be relevant to let us know you're interested. We will certainly start communications to the entire group when we get into session and start to have those needs, putting out a call. So I think we'll figure out how best to keep the entire network in the loop and how best to make sure you know when we're in need of help for something like that. But I think it can be a two-way street. So letting us know would be great. And then we will do our best to put out concise and timely calls for help.
Perfect.
I'm unmuted now. Thank you so much, Amy and Jenny, for unmuting me. Would you rather have us contact Jenny or you or both, or how do we do that?
I think both is fine. I'll start a little folder.
Okay.
Yeah, and as far as us creating some tools that would make it very easy for our network to really broadly contact our legislators once we start getting taking action on some of our bills and our increase. National CASA purchased some software that they've made as a resource to states and local programs. If you click on this link I put in the chat box, it'll take you to the grassroots efforts, and you'll see most recently we're currently asking Congress to support the CAPTA reauthorization, but we use this tool as a network nationally for the VOCA Fix Act. So if you click on Take Action and put your street address and your zip code, it automatically creates the letters. It's like a 3-click process to your own legislators. And we will be using this tool. Amy and I haven't connected on this yet, but it's a free resource to us. So we'll be using this tool as a state network for our communications this year.
Jenny, just to clarify, if you go to reactions at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button that says raise hand. But I also just changed the settings so you can unmute yourself now if you want to ask a question and you're having a hard time finding the raise hand button. We do have one more question from Amanda. She's saying, what data or sources do you use to help inform policy or funding positions, and what data is interesting to legislators?
Answer it in reverse. Data is only interesting to legislators up until a point. So we try to do like a sandwich of personal experience, data, personal experience, right? For an issue like funding, I think we can take a look at, as I've said several times, you all have done an amazing job of increasing your volunteers, and that means you can serve more families. And that means the cost of doing business is more. And that means we have data in all of that to justify asking for some additional state support for your work on an ongoing basis. Another example, and I'm not saying that this is a way we're necessarily going to go, but for other clients, it might be if there are underserved communities and we can associate a cost with what it would take to bring service into those communities, that would be another data point we would potentially bring on the funding side. In terms of informing policy, a new program like Flex, I'm not sure that there's a ton of examples of states that have done it, but we do know that through a generous grant from the Health Foundation, the 7th, and Leah, I think you said Jeffco also are serving youth under that program.
Just to clarify, I mistyped earlier. So there's 3 programs that are currently piloting it, and it's CASA of Jefferson and Gilpin counties, and Advocates for Children, CASA, Arapahoe, Lincoln, Douglas, and Elbert, and CASA of the 7th Judicial District. So we've got urban, suburban, and rural kids that are being impacted.
So we're starting to have, source material to inform that being a statewide program, the data that those programs are getting from serving those youth. And I think probably more importantly, since it's relatively new, just some of the anecdotes from, youth that have been linked with that financial mentorship or know that there's a little bit of a padding in a savings account for them and how that has changed their outcomes, changed their outlook, et cetera. Other than that, I would say, what else informs us in terms of taking positions or running legislation are just people like you in the field telling us that there's a problem you've run up against. And if we can solve it through statutory change, then that's the appropriate avenue. If it's a regulatory issue, that might be the appropriate avenue. If it's a awareness issue, that might be the appropriate avenue. But a lot of policy change comes from somebody identifying the problem and starting to talk about it in a way that, we can come up with a way to address it. So if you run up against barriers to doing your role as best as you can, we do want to hear about that. I do see a question from Mary that I think was answered in part. In addition to the national platform that's going to help us communicate with our legislators, I do want to be a partner with you all in preparing some of those templates, or if you're just interested in requesting coffee with your local elected, I'm happy to help you with an email on that. We want to make it so that it's personal to you, but that it's easy for you. So whatever you need to help facilitate that, I am happy to help do.
And in addition to some of the data that our legislators are interested in, Lily put some stats there in the chat box. So, you know, although we served over 4,500 children, we're still only serving 34% statewide of the children that could have had a CASA volunteer in an open dependency and neglect case in various placements. So there is a big need to close that gap. And legislators right now, and Amy, you can chime in, they're just really particularly interested in COVID, how our cases have changed, how our training of CASA volunteers might have changed, if we're seeing more physical abuse, more hospitalizations, more broken bones, if we're seeing cases last longer, if we're seeing, you know, an increase in cases that have substance exposure. So they're very in tune right now with child welfare. Last session and in the past few sessions, there's been some pretty significant child welfare related bills that have been system changing. And so, and we're really lucky to have the chair of our joint budget committee, chair or vice chair, he flip-flops. Senator Moreno is a supporter, big CASA supporter out of Adams County. Attends their events, and we have several CASA supporters on the Joint Budget Committee, but he is very in tune with child welfare, and you know, particularly more than others, and so we're lucky to have that knowledge there for our request this year.
Well, we have time for a few more questions if anyone has a question. Otherwise, we might be able to end a little bit early today. I did put the link to the survey in the chat. We would love your feedback about this session and your ideas for any future sessions. You can also add those in when you take the survey. Let's just see if anyone else has a question.
And with your permission, we can pull your emails from the Eventbrite, and I would love to keep you informed of our events coming up. For instance, the CASA Day at the Capitol or the Child Abuse Prevention Month. And I think that's a way we can continue engagement, and there won't be any gaps between the chains of communication, because most of the time Colorado CASA, we just communicate directly with local program executive directors and staff. But I just thought, you know, we're here and ready and really hungry to get involved. And so I'll check in with a few of you executive directors on the call, but with your permission, I'd like to create some sort of email list for just a few communications for this upcoming session with this group.
That idea looks very popular with the list so far.
Great.
At least the ones who are the bias to those who are saying yes. What we see.
Great, good.
Great. Hi, any last questions while we have Amy on the line? Okay, well, we'll send a follow-up to this, and I think that's it then. Thank you so much, Amy.